Hey, Nina, and welcome to the Tick Boot Camp podcast.
Thank you.
Well, it's been a long time coming. We've targeted you for this interview for a while, and because our list is so long and our wait list has been so delayed, it's taken a while to get you on here. But finally, the stars have aligned, and we have you with us. So thank you for taking time out to share your journey with the folks here who listen to the Tick Boot Camp podcast. And I have good news for our listeners, although they can't see us. They can hear that Matt Sabatello is not with me today, thankfully. I have the pleasure of working with one of our favorite folks. So Emma, why don't you introduce yourself and please share with folks what episode they can listen to you on, if you remember, when we did our first interview with you.
Hi guys, my name is Emma Pikoulas. I did an episode, I want to say back in April 2021, just about my Lyme journey. Yes, I am an OG. I'm proud of it. Just kind of going over my Lyme journey and what it put me through and what I did to heal and get to where I am today. I'm just happy to be back and learning more.
And I'm more than 50,000 people have listened to your journey. So, it's really cool that so many people are blessed with hearing your story and learning all the things that you've done to recover or go through a recovery journey. And then, of course, get to a point where you're healthy enough to co-host on this podcast pretty regularly. So it's really cool that you're doing that. So thank you very much. And Nina, you're going to have that same impact, right? And that's why it's really kind of you folks who are on this journey for nothing, right? You're not getting paid. Nobody's asking you to do anything other than just be kind, just share your journey. And Nina, it's really kind of you to do that and serve as a model for other folks who are on the earlier stage of their journey. So, Nina, while we do this, Emma's going to take you through your story, but why don't you begin by sharing with us where you currently live? And give us a little background about where you're from, because you do have New York roots, so we never like to ignore the New York roots with our guests. So give us that background so Emma can take you forward through your journey.
Yeah, so my mom's side of the family is from Queens. They migrated from Ecuador to Queens, and I was only born there, but I grew up in Florida, so I'm like Florida raised, but yeah. As soon as I left high school, I just went all over the country, and I was pretty nomadic. And that's how I got Lyme disease. And then I came back to Florida, which is where I am now. And it feels really good to be back. Florida is a really cool place, and it feels like home.
Wow. So how old were you when you moved to Florida?
Oh, I was just a baby. I was literally just birthed in New York. We were up there for the holiday. My mom was super, super duper pregnant. And I just kind of popped out while I was there. And then we just hung out for a while. Okay. And then we came back to Florida, and Central Florida, where I grew up.
Awesome. Did you enjoy your childhood in Florida?
I did. It was super country. Well, right now with all the development, it's not that country anymore. But growing up, it was a little country.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of my closest friends that I met when I was young are still my friends, and Florida's
awesome.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
The things that make the headlines in Florida are really questionable, and they make a lot of people question Florida.
Yeah.
But Florida is a big bag of mixed nuts, you know what I mean? You get all sorts of people, but there's a really good people in Florida, and I stand by Florida.
I mean, I hear you. I love Florida. I go as much as I can. Have you always been in Gainesville? Is that where you are now?
That's where I'm now, and I haven't always been here. I used to come a lot when I was in my early 20s, and fell in love with it. And then when I moved back just 6 years ago, I moved to Gainesville because it's really nice. It's got lots of natural springs and rivers and it's easy to drive around. It's not crazy Central Florida.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Nice. Okay. So growing up, were you outdoors a lot? You must have been.
Yeah. My mom did everything she could. She was a single mom, and she was always working. She was always hustling, and she always made sure that I did stuff. She's you're going to go to horse camp. You're going to go to Girl Scouts. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. It was very much a part of my childhood, which I'm so grateful for. Like she really made that happen for me. And so I really do owe it to her. Like I love being outdoors. Like I've spent a lot of time outside. I love hiking. I used to build hiking trails. I worked on conservation teams. Like I really, really love being outside. And yeah, a lot of people in my like demographic or like, you know, don't have that, or maybe it's a little intimidating to be outside for such a long period of time, or like not knowing how to be outside and not having those outdoor skills. But like I felt like I was really inclined to learn it because of the exposure I had to it as a child.
As a child growing up in Florida, have you heard about ticks?
No, I never knew about ticks, not until I was up in Massachusetts. But no, it was just like leeches, mosquitoes, snakes.
Wow.
That's it.
Wow. Okay. Wow. And you're outside growing up, were you like near the beach, or you were in more like marsh, wetlands?
Yeah, I was in the swamp.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was like in the swampy woods behind neighborhoods.
Wow.
Pretty buggy, you know, lots of spiders and mosquitoes, but I don't remember ever seeing a tick. Although now people say that there are ticks in Florida with different diseases, but that's a whole other thing.
All right. So when you, I have here you were 24 before you started experiencing any symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
So what was life like right before you started experiencing symptoms? Like just an idea. What were you working? Like 22, 23?
Also, I was in my 20s, so you know, life is to be experienced.
Yes.
But what was life? Yeah, life was like unpredictable. Life was like, sure, I'll come by later, no problem. Or like, let's hang out. Like I was very much like, I was never an extroverted person, but I was definitely like more excited to do stuff.
Yeah.
And I had more energy for sure. Like definitely had more energy and less pain. I mean, like, yeah, that was sort of like my vibrance never went away. Like I'm still like, that's very much embedded in my DNA. Like I feel like I'm a very vibrant and loving and like fiery person. So that hasn't died down, but like the amount I'm able to give, you know, myself or my relationships or the world have like significantly, decreased. Makes sense.
Were you working in your early 20s? Were you in school? I know you said you were nomadic. I'm very interested in your travels.
I was always working. Didn't go to school or anything like that. I was just like working jobs. I was like landing random jobs, seasonal work and blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Okay. So then at 24, what was your first symptom? What made you know? What started showing up in your life that was out of the blue in your body?
Yeah, well, I've found the tick. So I knew that it was Lyme disease. And it had completely, like, it was sort of like on my back near my armpit. And I was like coming out of the shower and I kind of noticed it in the mirror, but I touched it and it just fell. So it was like completely engorged at this point. And I knew where I got it from because a few days before that, I was like deep in the woods and was with a friend and they had found a tick, but they like caught it as soon as it got on. So I was like, oh, it was from that day. So in my head, I was like, okay, this was from like 2-3 days ago. But yeah, so I found it, but that whole, like right before I found it, I remember I was like nauseous and I was like, oh, I must have ate something weird. I don't know. Okay. And then I found the tick and then was like, oh shit, what do I do? But at the time I wasn't super aware of ticks. Like at the time I had only known one person with Lyme disease and she was also like older and I was young and she had it for a really long time. And she also had other, you know, health issues. So I wasn't really informed about anything. So when I found it, I didn't freak out. I was like, uh-oh. And then my housemate was like, you should really take Doxycycline. but I couldn't get a prescription. I didn't have health insurance. Of course, he's like a hoarder, so he had it, but it was like, but it was like expired or something. And he was like, here, take this. And I was like, okay. So I took the dose that was recommended, but I think I went beyond the 72-hour window. But I felt like crap. Like I was nauseous and I was like fevery and I had chills all over my body for like a week.
Okay. Wow. So it was pretty immediate after the tick bite that symptoms began.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And then how long did you do Doxy for? 72 hours?
Yeah.
Okay. And how do you remember how the Doxy made you feel?
It made me feel worse. Yeah, I had never been on it's an antibiotic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is.
Yep.
I had never been on an antibiotic before, pretty sure. Growing up, my mom was like, oh, you're sick. Here's chamomile tea, honey, like whiskey, and some lemon juice. Like, like that was like, we were very like anti like medicine. And so I was always kind of like afraid of like medicine. I hadn't taken a Tylenol until I was like 24 or something.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Like probably when I started getting Lyme, I was like, oh, maybe I should start taking Tylenol. But yeah, I remember the doxycycline like really, really wiped me out. Like I was not okay.
Yeah. Do you
I
remember?
think I puked. I think I might have puked.
Okay. Do you remember how else it made you feel?
Not really. I was just like nauseous and lethargic and yeah, nauseous and lethargic. Those were the two main symptoms that I had.
Okay. And then, so you did Doxy, and then how did it leave you feeling? Did you kind of like get on the upswing for a little bit after that, or that's when it hits the fan?
I really wish I had documented more during that time because it would have been so valuable now. But I think there was a period of time where I was like, so I took the Doxy, and in my head, I was like, oh, okay, well, I did the thing that like you're supposed to do. So I must have gotten rid of it. Like that's how I was thinking about it. I didn't understand that Lyme disease was this crazy ancient, like sneaky son of a gun who wanted to ruin my life, So there was a period of time. Oh yeah. And I remember, so like before that, I like to like drink and, go to occasional like parties. Like I wasn't like a drinker, but I would go out and socialize and like have a couple beers. And yeah, so after the Lyme disease, there were certain things I couldn't. So yeah, to answer your question, like after I found the tick and then took the Doxy, there were certain things that made me sick. Like an alcoholic beverage or even just like a sandwich. Like I felt like I was more sensitive to just everything.
Yeah.
And my like sense of smell I was just like a little bit more sensitive. I felt like I was already sensitive. In
general, yeah.
Yeah, in general, but I think my sensitivity had heightened after all of that. And I remember feeling like, okay, like the antibiotic, like antibiotics, historically make you feel like crap for like a few weeks. So like, this is just how I'm supposed to be feeling, like my body's just kind of coursing through the antibiotics. So, but this will like go away. So I remember it was just like kind of like a few weeks of me feeling like pretty low energy. And then maybe feeling like, okay, like Stella got her groove back, like I'm gonna keep going. Yeah, I don't know at what point I started having more of the intense pain. I feel like maybe a year went by where I was like managing and it wasn't super horrible.
Okay. Yeah. Was there a point where you were like, okay, this can't be the Doxy side effects or anything anymore?
It was like a roller coaster, and like over time, you might know, but like over time, like my perception of pain started to like swing. Even to this day, I'm like, is this a good day or a bad day? I think for someone who doesn't have like Lyme or chronic illness, this might be like the worst day of their lives, but for me, this is like a pretty okay day. So I think like my gauge for like what was normal was starting to like
Be clouded.
dissolve. And I
Yeah.
just like didn't know what was normal anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I was just like sleepier than usual for like a few years before I was like, uh-oh.
Okay. So until you were like, uh-oh, you were just managing, still working odd jobs, just living your life, having your friends, going to your parties. And so, no, because I get it. Because you don't, sometimes like for me, I didn't know anything was wrong until I had a beer one day and I was in a brain fog for a week. And I was like, that's not a hangover. Like,
Yeah.
so were you sensitive to anything else? Were you sensitive to the sun? Were you sensitive to temperature? It was food and alcohol.
Yeah, it was just like food, alcohol, like smells. It started to like increase over time. Again, I've always been pretty sensitive in general, but like I think the biggest thing that I noticed was that, like, I was super tired. Like I was just so tired. And I just wanted to sleep. Like I just wanted to sleep. Like that's all I could do.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I had a pre-existing injury from years before that where I had I just like, it was like an overuse injury on my shoulder. And I'd injured it and then the pain was just like gone for a long time. And then it wasn't until I got Lyme where the pain came back like times 100. Like it was like all the things that were wrong with my body before I got Lyme disease started to get my attention after I got Lyme disease, if that makes sense.
Totally. Okay. So you were on this roller coaster wave of like symptoms, but also like background symptoms. For how many years would you say until you were finally like, all right, what's going on? Or what was there like an onset of more severe symptoms that made you seek out more medical help?
Yeah, so for like the first 2 years, I wasn't feeling like completely myself or vital. And I had known a lot of like herbalists and stuff, like just where I was living and the people I was living with. And so like occasionally, so there was like 2 years I was like, oh, I feel like crap, I don't know what to do. And people would be like, well, and I'm like, yeah, I'm like, I didn't have health insurance and like, it was just like really hard for me at the time. And people were like, do you have Lyme? And I'm like, yeah, I do. They're like, well, you should get a diagnosis. And I'm like, I know I have it. Like I found it, you know what I mean? And I had people occasionally throughout those, like maybe a solid 2 or 3 years being like, oh, you're having symptoms here, try this herb here, try this. Okay, well, and I had a lot of people like throwing suggestions at me. So I'd be like, okay, like I'll try that. And then I would try and it wouldn't help. And they'd be like, oh, okay, well, look here, try this. And I had friends, because I was living up in Massachusetts where a ton of people have Lyme disease. And so I had my own like little network of people being like, who were on the same boat as me. Like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I have Lyme, or I do have Lyme. And I've taken the route of like going through all these doctors and stuff and haven't had any success. And so in my head, I already have the history of not trusting doctors. 2, I don't have health insurance. 3, I'm like hearing from people who have Lyme saying that they just wasted a bunch of time and money and stress, of like going to the doctors. And I'm like super afraid of needles. Like I'm the person who's like shaking and crying, like when they have to give blood, like that's me. I have to take the whole day off to do it. So like getting me to the doctor was like, it wasn't going to be an easy thing. And so I had been trying like little things. I had completely stopped eating certain food items. And I was like, oh, that seems to help for a while. And I'm like, oh, my symptoms are back. So clearly that's not it. So then I'd start eating bread again. And then start like just having like a mixed matchy kind of approach to how am I going to feel better. And then just being like, okay, I guess this is my new normal. And I'd say it was like that for the first few years.
Okay. So you knew you had Lyme and you were just basically like trying to just do its dance on your own. Like I totally understand everything you're saying. There's so many Lyme patients. How many doctors have they seen? And it's just been a waste of time and money and energy.
Yeah.
And so how did you finally get a diagnosis?
So I guess it was 4.5 years ago. I had like an office job and they had like killer like health insurance. And at this point, so that was like what I just told you about, like when I first found the tick, the first few years, like that was like sort of that was not the peak of me feeling bad. So I started to get really bad. Like I would say 4 or 5 years. Again, my exact timelines aren't perfect,
Okay.
But like about 4 or 5 years in, it started to get really bad. Like, and I was like, okay, I really need help. And so at that point, I started taking an herbal protocol. And I'm pretty sure I wanted the whole Herxheimer's reaction and all of that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go into this protocol and because I read stories and like it's produced by a group of herbalists in Vermont where like they have a ton of Lyme disease, and I was like, okay, great, this is what I'm going to do. It's going to be like intense and hardcore for a while. And I was just like really not okay. Like I was not okay before that, and that just took it up to a new level. But like I had days before and after the medication, after the herbal protocol, where I was like crawling on the floor to go to the bathroom. Like I was in so much pain.
It's okay. It's hard. It's so hard.
And at the time I'm like, damn, I'm only like 27. Like,
Yeah.
What is my life going to be like in 10, like, or even 2 years from now? Like, I don't even know, And so it was like really stressful. I was like pretty depressed at the time. I'm sorry to cry.
No, please. Please.
Yeah.
You're doing amazing.
Yeah. And so I took this herbal protocol and it felt like the Lyme was like dying off. And then I was feeling like pretty bad on the protocol. And then I came close to completing the protocol. And then I decided to come off of it because I was working like a full-time job at the time. And I was like, I've already taken so much time off. Like, I just can't do this anymore. And then I had some like roller coaster, months of like, okay, I'm like doing all right. Or like, okay, things are getting like better. And then boom, like I get a flare up. And then, so yeah, the flare ups have just been like on and off since the beginning of getting this Lyme. Like, like 1 week I'll have like an insane amount of like excitement for life and all this energy, and I'll like sleep well. And then there's like the next week, and then people have that like level of standard for me, like, oh, Nina, like you should be able to do whatever. And then I'm like, actually, like this week is completely different from last week. And so after the protocol, I just like, had the consistent like roller coaster of ups and downs of like feeling like, okay, this is really bad and this is really good, and just feeling, okay, it's going to be like this forever. And then I landed, and then I got health insurance and was like, okay, I should probably just, because at that point, like, I think I'd gotten some messages. No one flat out said like, we don't believe you have Lyme, but like energetically people were like, I was like picking up on this vibe of like, did you get a blood work done? And I'm like, no, I didn't. They're like, oh, well. And then in my head, I was like, oh, so maybe people don't believe me. Am I just like totally crazy and I don't actually have Lyme disease? Like, so I should probably just like shut my brain up and like get the test done and confirm that I have Lyme disease. And that's exactly what I did. And it was so validating to see that like I had a positive test. I was like, oh, because like, I had all these like feelings of like shame over the years of like, canceling plans, like not wanting to like hang out, or like being unavailable to my family, or just like being really lazy, or like feeling like I'm being really lazy as if it was like a bad thing. But so I got the results and I was like, oh my God, I'm so happy that I was like so happy that I had an answer.
Yeah.
And a diagnosis, but it was also kind of like, for a moment there, I had a little bit of faith that the doctor would be able to help me, but it seemed like actually they don't, I mean, at least not in Florida anyway, because like Lyme isn't super present in Florida. So none of the doctors I talked to were able to really offer any insight or even make any like basic suggestions about anything. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm on my own again. And they wanted to do a bunch of testing on me, but that required more needles and more uncertainty and just like more time and more money. And it's not like they gave me a lot of confidence, and they weren't like, well, we're going to do this, and then that'll like lead to the, having an answer for this diagnosis. Like, it didn't really help. They didn't give me a ton of confidence that like taking the next step was like a good idea.
Yeah. So you sought out the herbalist prior to the diagnosis or after, the one that did the herbs with you?
I did the herbs before.
Okay. Can I ask why you stopped? They were just too intense.
They were so intense.
Yeah.
They were so intense. It really intensified. I think, I could find the protocol if you're really interested in what the ingredients were, but it was like knotweed, cat's claw, like dandelion, a couple other supportive herbs for the liver, because it was like, we're going to be like pushing this Lyme out. We need to support the liver. So it was like a whole complete like complex of herbs to support your body. But I think my body went into Herxheimer's reaction.
Yeah, it probably got overloaded.
And I just like I was like, okay, this is good. It's like, I'm going to handle this. I'm going to like deal with this for a while. And I just couldn't. And then, so yeah, that was the first treatment I did, was the herbal protocol. And then the second thing I did was get the lab work and speak to Western doctors. And then, wasn't able to get help. And now I'm on a whole other path.
Okay. So can I ask, and you can say no, what your symptoms were at the time of the herbalist that made you go seek him or her out then?
The first time?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, my symptoms from the herbal protocol was, a heightened flare up. Like, it was very like reminiscent of like a flare up that I am very familiar with, but it was like a flare up like times 1,000. And so for me, what that looks like is like every tiny little like joint in my body feels like it's on fire, and it feels like I'm moving mountains just to pick up like a toothbrush, is like how it felt. Like every movement felt agonizing. And when I have my Lyme flares, that's still what it feels like, but just less intense. And now I know what my triggers are, so I can sometimes manage it. But yeah, so the herbal protocol was those symptoms intensified. So the deep ache, the fevers, the chills, the like aches, it hurts to move.
Did you have any neurological symptoms? Can I ask?
Did I don't, I'm not sure, but I did have a ton of mental fog, and I still do when I have a flare up. So it's like someone's talking to me and I just like, I don't understand, or I'm trying to process a thought and I don't understand what's going on. Is how it feels. It feels like what's happening, it's like a very lost feeling, which is pretty anxiety producing.
Totally. Yeah.
So yeah, it was a lot of mental fog and like agitation.
Yeah.
And pretty depressing.
Okay. Did you have any GI issues? Stomach?
I did not.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it definitely affected you physically and mentally Holy moly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you got tested for Lyme, did your doctor test you? Do you know if she tested you for co-infections?
She did not test me for co-infections. And at the time I didn't know about co-infections, but I should get tested for co-infections, right? That seems like a good idea.
Maybe, I don't know. Who knows? It's
Yeah.
all a blur.
Yeah.
Okay, so you did the herbalist and then you got your Lyme diagnosis, and these Western doctors wanted to do further testing. And where are you now?
Yeah, so where I'm at now, so the doctors wanted to do more testing. They weren't giving me a ton of confidence. And so I sort of tried to go through like a phase of acceptance, of thinking like, okay, this is what it is. Like, what do I know? Like, what tools do I have to like help me like manage my stress? And at the time I hadn't really identified what my triggers were, because I was just like having flare up after flare up after flare up. But after that, I really started to like take a look at what was happening in my life before a flare up. And I also started seeing an orthobionomist. It's like a body worker. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's amazing. It's just like a very gentle style of body work that supports the body and organs and all this stuff. It supports it in a very unique way. I can't really describe it, but feels really good. And it's a great modality of massage. And that really helped me like focus in on like, oh, I'm actually like inviting a lot of stress factors into my life, like not on purpose, but like there's things I can do to like kind of be present in my body. And like, I think it allowed me to like look at what feels good.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Because I was seeing her on a regular basis and I was like, okay, these sessions feel really good. And I was like, how can I replicate this feeling? Like, this feels good. And how do I feel like this more? And I was like, oh, right. Like having my phone around and just like picking up for when everyone, when anyone calls is stressing me out. And like my job is stressing me out. And like, all these things are stressing me out. Being on the go is like stressing me out. Like I can't do it anymore. And so I started to just like I quit my job and I just like couldn't do it anymore. I was like, I have to go. And so I was starting to pay attention to the things that were happening in my life before the flare-ups and trying to just accept. At this point, I'm not like drinking, or I'm paying real close attention to like my food and diet. And I'm like researching nutrition and just really trying to formulate a plan that worked for me and just like experimenting. Sorry, my dog. It's okay. And I forgot what I was saying. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. You were figuring out what stressed you out before a flare. You were doing your food and diet.
Food and diet, and really trying to be preventative about stress factors, because there was a big relationship between stress and a flare up. And it was like I was so sensitive at this point from my Lyme that like if I had like a stressful phone call for like 2 minutes, it would like ruin my like next 3 days. Like my nervous system is still so fragile. So like I really had to like mitigate those things, right? So it was like, oh my God, so-and-so's calling me. And I know like that is really going to trigger stress in my body. And I had to start like weighing the pros and cons, like, is it worth it? And I'm like, actually, no, it's not. Like, and so like really trying to just like cut the fat, and like only say yes to things that actually like obviously you can't do that with everything in your life because like capitalism is
Obligations, yes.
yeah. But for the most part, there was like a lot of things that I was able to start pushing out of my life and saying no to. And once I started doing that, like I was able to kind of slow down and be more present with my body. And every day is different and difficult, but for me, that was like the biggest thing. Like this, my nervous system is so fragile. And so if I can like reduce stress from any angle, then I'm just going to do it.
Yeah, totally. What were you focusing on with your diet? Are you still focusing on?
Always focusing on food. It's really hard. Food is hard. It's like sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm like, it was like a roller coaster because I was like battling, like being pretty depressed and anxious about not feeling good. And there were like stretches of time where I would eat like a saint, like I would just be making all this stuff and it'd be like, I'd be eating the rainbow and I wouldn't be eating, caffeine or bread, and I'd be going to bed at a certain time and I'd be getting all this exercise and I would still be feeling like crap. So then I'd be like, really depressed for like the next like month and being like, well, you know what? None of it matters. Like, I'm just going to like eat cheeseburgers and just because none of it matters. And so I had that, that feeling come up a little bit and then me kind of reeling it back in and being like, actually, you know what? It
Let
does
me try again.
it does matter. And I feel worse when I eat those things. And so who knows how I would feel if I didn't focus on like mitigating stress and paying attention to what I put in my body. So yeah, I think all those things have really helped me in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Are you still doing orthobiotomy? Did I say it right?
Yeah, you did.
Hey, are you still doing it?
I am, and I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say that was instrumental in at least getting you back on your feet?
It was a lot of ups and downs because sometimes I felt like the body work somehow stimulated the Lyme. I don't know. Lyme was so creepy. But so there were some weeks where I was like, oh, this is great. Other weeks where I was like, oh, I feel a little funky, but then I'd feel good the next day.
Okay.
But yeah, that is something I still do regularly. And I find body work so relaxing.
Yeah.
And massage so relaxing. So it's like, if I can just feel that relaxed as much as I can, I have to just like chase that feeling,
Totally.
That's something I will never give up. I will like go bankrupt before I give up body work.
Yeah. Good. Not good, but like,
yeah.
I can relate. So that's okay. So where are you now?
Yep. So where I'm at now, so obviously the undercurrent is mitigating stress and paying attention to what I'm putting in my body. Mm-hmm. But I recently started seeing a Chinese medicine doctor. Okay. And he is amazing. We haven't worked together for too long. Okay. But he's worked with a lot of Lyme patients actually. And I think he's from the Northeast. Okay. And yeah, so like the feedback is good and like everything he says makes a lot of sense to me. And I had seen a Chinese medicine doctor years ago for my Lyme, and they were kind of chaotic and not that helpful, and didn't have experience working with Lyme patients. So then I had to stop, and I was like, okay, I can't just go to any Chinese medicine doctor. Like I have to find someone who I feel like can handle or can offer a lot of insight around Lyme and has experience working with people with Lyme. And so I finally found that person. Well, my partner, my boyfriend has Lyme disease too. So he's connected, and he knows this person who's the Chinese medicine doctor who has worked with Lyme patients. And so I started seeing him, and he's really offered a lot of guidance about like heat in the body, which I guess in Chinese medicine is like yang. So I'm pretty yanged out, I have like a lot of excess heat, and I guess it's typical for like most Americans to have excess heat. And that's the heat in Chinese medicine is like the go, go, go feeling.
Yeah.
Gotta go, gotta go, gotta go. And it can be kind of racy and it can create inflammation. And so there's a lot of foods that can balance out excess heat in the body. Foods to avoid. I feel like I'm being robbed of things I love. So I've cut out garlic and onions.
Oh
and
my God.
the train I'm on right now. And I actually feel like my energy level is just a tiny bit more stable. Like I actually feel more stable. And he has me on an herbal protocol too. That's less intense, as the one I was doing a while ago.
Okay.
But so that's what I'm on right now. And yeah, trying to get enough beauty rest, pay attention to what I eat, and reduce stress. I mean, that's like, yeah, I mean, but I'll try anything, like any like alternative type medicine for Lyme. Like I'll go ahead and try it.
Have you, how long have you been doing this herbal protocol?
Not for very long. It's just been a few months.
Okay. And do you feel generally better? Are you noticing Herxheimer's?
No Herxheimer's, and I'm generally feeling better. But it's funny because it's hard to realize progress as it's happening. And so, my boyfriend and I, we've been together, I think like, I don't even know, like 4 or 5 years, something like that. And he's been so supportive. I'm so blessed. Like, honestly, if he didn't have Lyme disease, I don't know. I just, it's so hard to understand what someone's going through so I feel so seen by him in that way. But he's pointed out to me, and I didn't really reflect on it until we talked about it, but he was saying like 4 years ago, I was like at my worst. Like I remember like every day being like, this is the worst day of my life. My pain is at a 10. Like I'm going to die. I just felt like it's over. It's done.
Yeah.
Like, this is it. Like, this is my life. And I just felt so horrible. And those were the days where I was like crawling around and I couldn't pick anything up. Like, it was like really bad. And so over time, I guess that started to change and I didn't realize that was changing. I'm in pain every day, but my pain is significantly less. And I forget to like appreciate that. But I think I have made progress. I've made a ton of progress over the years. And I needed someone to point that out to me. Like, hey, you're actually doing good, kid.
Yeah. Aw, that's very good that you support each other at that. It's so important that you feel seen and heard at home and in your relationship. I had a question in my Lyme brain. Push it right out of my head. So what you attributed to your progress that you needed someone to remind you because you still feel like in the throes of Lyme, because it's hard to see it. But at that time it was focusing on your food, mitigating stress levels, and this body work orthobiotomy that got you to where we are today.
I'd say so, yeah. And then honestly, just even I know there are false negatives, which is a real bummer. I've known people with Lyme who get tested and it comes out negative, but I got a positive result. So the validation, I can't express like the significance of being validated by that diagnosis, like was really like it alleviated this other part of my like shame, and so that was helpful. Instead of being like, am I crazy? I should feel better by now, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I can't stress enough, like for me, the biggest piece of this Lyme journey and of this Lyme journey is really reducing the stress. Yeah, for me, that's like the biggest thing. And I think stress is like, takes many different forms. Like it could just be like being on social media for too long or being on a phone call with like I don't know, like a family member for too long or at all. Or, you know,
Yeah.
no, there's like just so many like little stress factors, like maybe not going to the grocery store right now because there's traffic, like, and I don't want to sit, like, there's just so many stress factors. And to me, that's been the biggest source of relieving stress, is avoiding those things.
Yeah.
And
That's awesome. That's awesome, but that's good that Lyme was able to like show you how to take your health into your own hands and have the strength to develop boundaries and say, I'm sorry, babe, I can't do that today. Like pick and choose our wins. But so where would you say you are now compared to when you first got bit?
I think I'm like in my acceptance phase. I'm like, okay, like this is the life that was given to me. It was like, and so it's hard to say where I was mentally when I got bit, because I was so young and that was so long ago. And when I'm, when you're really young, it depends on who you are, but when I was really young, I thought I was like impervious, like I was kind of a wild child, like, like I thought that, oh, like if I'm not feeling fine now, I'll be fine later. Like things are going to be fine. But then I soon realized that wasn't the case for me. So, yeah, so I think when I got bit, I was under the impression that like, okay, this is temporary. And then as I realized it wasn't temporary, which happened over the course of many years, led to a lot of anxiety and depression and like isolation.
Yeah.
And now I'm more in the phase of like, okay, this is the hand I've been dealt. What can I do to live my life?
Yeah.
And enjoy my life?
Yeah. Okay. Do you plan on going further with treatment? Are you going to still stick to this herbal protocol? Do you plan on doing co-infection testing?
Co-infection testing, that's a really great reminder to do that. This traditional Chinese medicine doctor that I'm seeing is really amazing and has offered so much insight so far. So I'm going to just do whatever he tells me, and see how that goes.
Yeah. I got it, babe. Can you share the herbals that are making you feel a little better?
I don't know the Chinese names. I can't even pronounce them.
Okay.
And even if I did, it's so custom, like the way they do traditional Chinese medicine doctors treat clients is like taking pulse, looking at your tongue, asking you a million questions about like,
lifestyle,
GI stuff, like sleep patterns, like childhood stuff, like eating habits, like location, like where you live. Like there's so many different factors. So like the blend that was made was completely customized to me personally.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the real beauty. Like that's why I really am into this, because I'm like, oh, it was like custom to me, like in my crazy life.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So would you consider antibiotics in the future?
I would need to meet someone who had Lyme for a long time. I would need to like hear testimonials from people. I would need to do a lot of research, right? And I would need to hear directly from people what their Lyme story is and what it did for them.
Yeah.
For me to just trust it, because the gut microbiome is so fragile, and the adverse effects of taking antibiotics, traditional like drug, prescription drugs or like pharmaceuticals, I'm afraid of them.
Totally.
And so I would be really cautious, but I so at this point in my life, I'm not considering it because I'm on this whole thing.
Yeah.
And so we'll see how desperate I get. But I actually feel like the thing I'm doing right now is actually kind of cool because it's really addressing like the inflammation deep in my body. So I don't know. I'll get
No,
back
that's
to you in
awesome.
like 3 years and let you know if I consider antibiotics.
Well, hopefully you don't have to.
Yeah. Thanks.
So looking back, is there anything that Lyme taught you that you're grateful for?
Mm.
Lyme showed you about yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, what you'll tolerate, what you can and can't do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, like having Lyme for as long as I've had it. And it's been a really intense battle for me and for so many people, obviously. But I'm like still able to like create a life that is like vibrant. And yeah, I'm always proving myself wrong because like, I have those moments where I'm feeling like really like, like I'm really depressed about this. And then bam, I get like this wave of creative energy being like, you can just enjoy this. And then I really enjoy that like creative burst, and then, yeah, so it's like, it's interesting that I can still tap into that through the pain. And I feel like I've also connected with people in a really deep way. And I have a lot of compassion for people. I've always had compassion for people, but I have like a newfound, like, oh, okay, like people are really struggling out there, whether it's Lyme disease or something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really helped me with like, so I practice like minimalism now. And that was really, I would really like, I owe it to, a few different things, but I'd say having Lyme is a big reason why, because I get so fatigued with like decision making and like running around. I'm like, I need my home to be like super accessible and I need it to be easy to navigate. And like, I can't afford to like run around not being able to find something. Like, that's just not in my capacity. And so I really minimize my stuff. And because of that, I've curated a really fun, calming kind of home. It's vibrant, it's colorful, but it's like very like soothing. And I think I really took my domestic lifestyle to a whole other level because I spent so much time at home. I spent so much time in my bed for so long.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's beautiful in itself, just being able to make your home beautiful and more tailored and customized to you and your life. That's a really refreshing perspective. I haven't heard of that with Lyme, but I could totally absolutely picture like the ease that comes with that. So that's amazing.
I have a couple of things I wanted to discuss with you. The two of you are having such a beautiful conversation that I hate to interrupt, but you've shared some things that I think are really powerful here that I'd like to highlight. And one of the things that I'd like to highlight is the important role that your partner has played in your journey. And I'd like to also add to that one of the things you said early on in this conversation was that you would wish that you had taken some notes or you had journaled some of the early symptoms. And the question I have to ask for you, knowing how the human brain works and knowing that our brain is designed to look at the gap rather than the gain. Do you think that had you been journaling all along about how you were improving and have a way of looking back at all of the things that you've gained, that would help you to feel better about this journey and not necessarily seeing this big long gap that at times would be triggering for you and to make you feel maybe worse than you should because you aren't realizing how much of a gain you've made?
I think that's a great question. And I think, yes, because I think I'm not like a journaler, but I want to invite that in my life. And I think it's really a chance, like, to journal, sit down and journal is a really great chance to like process some feelings that haven't been opened yet, potentially, and I think processing emotions is just so beneficial for so many reasons, instead of just being like, oh, I'll think about it later. Or like, I'm kind of like a busy bee kind of person. So I'm a little bit like racy, and so I think had I taken time to kind of slow down, I think journaling is a chance to slow down.
And slow down your brain from overthinking and having your brain look at, again, that big gap between where you would really like to be and where you are. And it causes us not to see all the gains that we've made and celebrate all of the improvements we have made, right? And that, I think that's one of the beautiful parts of your story, that you have a very influential, intimate partner who it feels comfortable enough to say to you, Nina, you've made a lot of gains. Let's talk about all these gains you've made, because it is important for us to celebrate that. It's important us to see that, you're much better off than you had been before. And let's use that as a vehicle for feeling good about ourselves and good about where we're going, so that we have the energy to continue to improve on this journey.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Yep. I'm so grateful for my partner. Like, not only will he be like, hey, let's look at all the gains, but he'll be like, what you're doing right now is going to stress you out. Can you stop? And I'm like, whoa, wait, but I need to. And he's like, but we know we have a pattern. And I'm like, oh yeah, we do. And like, it's easier to observe from the outside. Journaling can offer that, or having a friend or a person to like observe you and witness you is like a really great chance to be like, hey, let's look at the pattern.
Yeah. So let's talk about another thing, because I think it's another part of the beauty of your story is, one of the things you've talked about is the grief cycle, and you didn't describe it as the grief cycle, but you had described the grief cycle, perfectly. And for those listeners who are not aware of what the grief cycle is we generally begin with denial, right? And then the next stage is anger, and then after anger, we start to get sad, and that whole sadness can put us into a loop where we can become depressed. And then after we finish that stage, we get into the bargaining stage, where we start to bargain with God or the universe and make all kinds of promises. And then we get to this point of acceptance, right? And acceptance is a beautiful thing, because it allows us to then create something new, right? The newness doesn't happen until we get through that cycle, right? And your cycle was a pretty long cycle. It took many, many years for you to get through that cycle. But when you finally got to the stage of acceptance, then you could start to build and do so many of the things that you're doing now. So talk to us about this acceptance piece, because I don't want our listeners to think that you're just accepting that you're going to be sick forever, and accepting that you're not going to get any better, and accepting that you haven't made any gains, right? But it's the acceptance of where you are, and then taking the steps where you respond with ability, right? Responsibility really means responding with ability, and how you can now take these steps to create the new person, right? And you and Emma have so beautifully captured the essence of the new Nina, where she is, where she has a very clean house and a very efficient lifestyle, and somebody who is aware of her energy needs, and she's really careful about her diet, and she's really careful about what promises she makes to other people. And I mean, you really have a beautiful, beautiful essence, and you really understand what's important. I just love to hear that, right? So talk to us about how that acceptance wasn't just accepting that it's bad and you're never going to get better, but it's accepting your reality, and how that's allowed you to become a more pure version of yourself, and you now have more pure relationships with the people in your life.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the grief cycle, or the stages of grief. And we all know that's not linear. So I would bounce around, right, constantly between denial, bargaining, depression, being angry, and then acceptance, and blah, blah, blah. And yes, I didn't just accept, right? I know, I feel like acceptance is like a loaded word. Like, I don't accept the way society is, but I can accept myself in the puzzle of it, right? And so when I start to accept, like, there's no possibility, the possibilities are extremely diminished if I'm operating from a place of denial, or if I'm operating from a place of like sadness. But when I'm operating from a place of acceptance, I feel like there's a little bit more freedom in that, and more possibility. And I feel like I can more aggressively honor my truest self by setting boundaries, by creating a lifestyle for myself that I know works for me based on feedback I've gotten, from my own life. And I mean, it's really funny because like, so whenever I make a new friend now, like one of the first things I tell them, whereas like I wouldn't have done this before, but this was like something I learned over the year, over the years with Lyme disease. But now what I do is I just send them a text message because I want them to have it in writing. I don't want to have to worry about how I'm going to say it or if they're really listening to me or whatever. But like I have a text message that I'll send a new friend or an old friend that like we, hasn't gotten the update yet, but I'll send them a long text message being like, hey, blah, blah, blah. I love being your friend. You're really awesome. I hope to hang out when it's possible, but I need you to know that like, I'm pretty unavailable. I'm pretty sick a lot of the times. Even if I'm not, I feel like even if I'm having a good day, I need to be able to just bask in the fact that I'm having a good day and give that day to myself. But I'm not the person who's going to quickly respond to your text message. I'm not the person who's going to like call you back. Like I'm not that person. And as long as there's consent, within that, then it's okay. Like I don't want anyone to, and I love all my friends, but like my capacity is so limited. And when I'm having a good day or a bad day, it doesn't matter what kind of day I'm having, I need to focus on myself for my health. And not only my physical health, but my mental health, and it's all wrapped up together. But I love that I do that now. Like I just send a text message and I'm like, hey, this is me. I'm not like available. I'm not going to hang out. You're probably going to invite me to hang out a bunch. I'm going to say no, nothing to do with you. Like you're amazing. This is just like where I'm at. And that's the acceptance piece a little bit. Just knowing where my boundaries are.
Let me share another observation that I made that I think has just been so beautiful about this conversation. And I really thank Emma for doing such a great job with exploring this with you. And that is what vibe I kept feeling was that you became free, right? And we here at Tick Boot Camp are actually starting a new podcast called the Lyme Freedom Formula. And the way we were defining freedom, and I think you really captured the essence of freedom, quite frankly, Nina, is the way Viktor Frankl defined freedom in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. And for those of our listeners who haven't read that book, it's a book written by a man who was a concentration camp victim in World War II, and that he was able to define why he was able to go through such a horrific experience, because he discovered what freedom was. And he said, freedom is that space between an event and how you respond to an event. And that's where our freedom is. Freedom isn't the right to do whatever you want to do or do whatever. It is that space between an event and how we respond to it. And even the Nazis couldn't take that away from him. And once you understand where your freedom is, then the world opens up to you. Then you understand your essence. You understand where you are making choices. What I thought was so beautiful about the conversation you were having is you said, I don't have to have a lot of stuff despite living in a capitalist society. In fact, I reject that. You said, I don't have to be controlled by social media. In fact, it was stressing me out, and I acknowledge it was stressing me out. And although young people my age are all spending a lot of time on social media, I'm free not to do that. You said, and you really articulated this really beautifully, I am a social person. I understand as a social being that I'm going to have interactions with other people, but I'm free to let them know what my limitations are. And I tell them that in writing, so that there is not any misunderstanding and people aren't calling me any names or, some of the things that might happen, right? So what you have both beautifully done together is defined how your acceptance was not accepting that you will be sick forever. Your acceptance is accepting who you are and what freedom is, and living your essence in a very free space. So give me your reaction to that, Nina. Did I hear all that right?
Yes. Yeah. And yes. Yeah, having control over the essence of freedom in my life.
Over everything, right? I mean, literally over everything. You are free from capitalist restraints. You are free from having too many possessions, which, by the way, when you have too many, they end up possessing you. You are free from social constraints. You're free from social media. You are just living the life you want to lead, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely not free of, I mean, like, yeah, I make poor decisions, right? But those are separate from my, like, I have moments where I'm like shining, but then I have moments where I'm like on social media for way too long, right? And then now I have a dog who I love very, very much. And of course, most of the stuff in the house is hers now. She has, you know, but it's for her and it's for her health and it's things she loves. So it's just funny, but it's all relative. And well, I don't know if I don't know if it's all relative, but I do think taking control and accepting who I am as a person has been the most liberating thing I could have done for myself. And just, yeah, knowing what works for me and inviting that into my life is so nice. Like, I think I said earlier, like, I don't love to sit down and like read a full novel, and I don't need to feel guilty about that. But what I can do is just like do something else that brings me pleasure and joy.
Right, and you're in touch with your feelings, which is sort of the last piece that I wanted to observe, right? And it's one of the things that Emma really beautifully explored with you, which is you understand that nothing's either good or bad. You're just going on the experience, and you're learning through this journey, and you're learning how to read your body signals so that you are in a position where you're making good choices that are serving you rather than undermining you, regardless of who's encouraging you to take whatever step you want to take, right? So emotions are powerful things, not to get you caught up in a loop. And you had some challenges where you were dealing with some depression and some of those kinds of things. Yeah. But once you finally got, again, to this place where you were in a place of acceptance, you understood what your emotions were. You understood what all these experiences were. You showed yourself grace on many occasions, even when you're spending a little too much time on social media, which, by the way, we're happy with that because we would have never found you if you weren't there. Thank you for being on social media. And by the way, you're talking to a guy who never had any social media until we started Tick Boot Camp, because I just thought it was a horrible tool. And I now see the beauty of it, right? I mean, the three of us would have never met, but for social media, right? So exactly. It can be a tool for good for people who are free and looking to connect with other people who who are of the same spirit, right? So why don't you talk to us a little bit about that piece of this experience that you've had, and how being in touch with your emotions and understanding that they are tools for you and not something to sort of keep you down, that that your emotions became a very powerful part of your essence.
Yes. So I think, excuse me. Yes, I think what you made a really great point of like, about what you said about, it's neither bad nor good. Right. And I think when I get trapped in the feeling of like, oh, this is so bad. Oh my gosh, this is like and it feels that way. Right. But like the more, I don't want to say that the more attention I give that, the more pain I feel, because that's not true. The pain's there, but the more joy I can add to the bucket, right? And if I can step away from like just constantly vocalizing how bad I feel, I think that the container expands a little bit. So like I'm able to, just invite more like joy into my life. And I can really say that that's been true over the years. It's like if I'm having a really bad Lyme day, or if I'm having a really bad Lyme flare up for a month, sometimes like it can be really bad. But if I'm focusing on how bad it is, then I'm going to be really anxious, really depressed, really triggered, really traumatized from the whole thing. But if I can just really like invite the, the things that make me feel good and the fun and the joy, and focus on some like positive things, it really does change my mental state in a very significant way. And I think ultimately that's affecting my nervous system, which is then shortening the life cycle of the flare up and having all these other amazing ripple effect benefits.
So let me talk with you one last piece of the conversation, and then Emma's going to talk to you about your transformation, how you're now serving the folks in the Lyme community, right? But one of the things that Emma asked you about was diagnostic testing, and you knew you had Lyme disease from the bite. You knew that you had these symptoms all along. You finally needed to take a Lyme disease test to be validated, and thank God you did test positive so that you were able to get that validation and have that the emotional stability that comes along with that. And unfortunately, no, that's very rare, especially with doctors who should be making clinical diagnoses but are afraid to do that or aren't well trained enough to do that. But thankfully, you didn't have that part of your journey. But now that you've at this stage of acceptance, this really beautiful place that you're at, I'd like to argue to you that you're in a place where you can make even greater gains with your recovery journey. And the reason I believe you are in a position to do that is not only because you're less likely to be triggered and therefore frozen and unable to move, because what happens when we get triggered is we get paralyzed, but even more importantly, you're now in touch with your onboard diagnostic system. And when you're going through the trial and error process of trying new treatment protocols, if and when you get to a plateau with the current practitioner that you're working with, because you're so in touch with your body, both your physical and your emotional signals, you'll be able to better read whether or not something is helping you or not helping you, and you'll be in a better position to pivot from one trial to the next when you're going through that process. So talk to me about how that is a really beautiful piece of your acceptance and how your onboard diagnostic system, which is much better than any blood test, urine test, or any other kind of test, will put you in a position where acceptance is not only freedom, but it's empowering.
Yes, acceptance is empowering in that because it allows me to advocate for myself. Like before I really had, so there was a time I went to a doctor and he told me that he was like skeptical of Lyme. In so many words, he was like, I'm skeptical. And I remember thinking like, wow, a long time ago, this would have really affected me. Like this would have really like messed up my day. I would have been like really pissed off because he doesn't know what I've been through. Like he has no idea. But in that moment, I was like, okay, like I'm just going to use you for some lab work and then just like take the results and then do what I want with that and go to someone who sees me for me and sees what I'm going through and can validate that. And so I feel like I'm better able to navigate help, by having that model for myself.
Yeah. Awesome. So would you do you see yourself, if this doctor has you on a herb that suddenly you're in the throes of like a huge flare, Herxheimer, whatever it is, it's too much for your body, you would be in the place now to have a meeting with him and ask to change things, advocate for a different, smaller dose or whatever it is?
Yeah, well, with the Chinese medicine doctor I'm seeing now, I do feel like, I mean, he's also just like really amazing. So it feels like the care that I'm getting from him is extremely collaborative, and supportive. So, and he like fully accepts Lyme disease as a thing. Whereas like I've met doctors who are just not really on board, and I'm like confused. I'm like, where are you at? They're like, we don't know. I'm like, okay. But I feel like with the Chinese medicine doctor I'm seeing now, yeah, I feel like I feel like in any space at this point, I can advocate for myself in the way that I need to. without feeling like stupid,
Oh,
or crazy.
yeah.
Like I feel confident in what I have to say, and I know what's working for my body,
Yeah.
and I know what's not working for my body.
Okay. That's awesome. That is so huge. Again, after just being through all of this, just feeling comfortable to collaborate with the doctor and being authentic, just not like, yeah, I'll try this just because he said I should, like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah.
that's huge. And that's a strength that you developed. These muscles, they did come.
Stronger every day.
Exactly. So, are you doing anything to serve the Lyme community now?
Am I doing anything to serve? So I have a lot of open-ended, a lot of ongoing, messages, text messages and Instagram messages. I've posted about having Lyme disease. So a lot of people have come to me being like, oh, you have Lyme too. Or I'll see someone else post and then I like reach out to them like, oh, you have Lyme. And then like, even in Florida, like you have less Lyme patients, but there's a couple people in Gainesville that I've met up with just to talk about Lyme,
Yeah.
which has been kind of nice because, yeah. And then we're like, oh, what have you tried? And then you share what you've tried. And what it comes down to, a lot of it is stress. A lot of people are like, yes, it's the stress. The stress is like, and that's so validating. And people are like, yeah, just like do what you need to do to like get rid of the excess stress. And so I'm always like pushing that on people. Like people are like, so what have you done? I'm like, not like stress is, mitigating stress is going to like heal your Lyme. That's not what I'm saying at all. That would be really obnoxious for me to say, I don't know, who knows, but I don't know what someone's going through. And for some rando just to be like, dude, if you just get rid of the stress, you'll be all right. So I'm like not going to say that to anybody because I don't know where they are. And it's like a hard thing. Like if I heard someone tell me that in the throes of like a really bad flare up, I think I would have been like really upset.
Yeah.
Where, like, and so, and I don't think it'll heal a Lyme, but I think it'll like make living with Lyme that much more livable, tolerable. So yeah, that's something I'm always talking about with people. And then I also I do like tidy consulting for people, and most of my clientele are people with disabilities. And and so I really like to work with people on making their home more accessible. I don't want people to be minimalist. I don't want them to be anything other than who they want to be. But when people start coming to me and saying, I'm so stressed out and I have, physical limitations or whatever, and I'm like drowning in stuff, I'm like, well, how can we make your home more accessible? And so I've worked with a lot of patients on that. And I love, not patients, clients, speaking of patients as if I was a patient at the doctor, but no, I worked with a lot of clients on making their home more accessible. And to me, that's such a valuable gift. And I really want, if people want that for themselves, and I want it for them. So yeah, I don't know.
No, that's so big. Just that it's taking something that you learned right there in your big Lyme journey. Oh my God, this is too much for me. I cannot. Your home needs to be your sanctuary, no matter what you have. But something like Lyme, some type of illness, disability, you need to feel safe at home. And if there's an overwhelming mess, that's just amazing that you were able to take that lesson and convert it into a tool to help others. So that is an absolute way to give back right there to any community, but also the Lyme community.
And interesting enough, before I found that tick and before I got Lyme, I was managing livestock at a farm in the country in Western Massachusetts. And there was a neighbor who had Lyme disease. This was before I knew about Lyme. This was before I had Lyme. And she was really, really, really sick. Like it was so sad. It was like, yeah. And so I saw her and I was like attracted to her because she was like beautiful and she was like, she had such a cool vibe. And so like, or whatever. So I said hi, and we became really good friends. And she told me all about her Lyme, and that was my first knowledge of it. And so I would go over after my long work day and go over and like clean her dishes, and I'd do her laundry, and I'd put stuff away, and I started organizing all of the stuff around her bed. And that was sort of my first like awareness of like accessibility stuff within the home. And so I would like organize her stuff, and she had a hard time sleeping. So I would sleep in her bed with her. And I usually like snore, but like I never snored with her. So I would just like, I was like her sleeping companion. So I would just like come over and like clean her house and then just sleep in her bed with her. And she would just like wake up feeling like super restful, which is really unlike me. Like I've always slept like a tornado. Like I'm just like moving around, I'm snoring, I'm like flipping around, blah, blah, you know. But with her, I always like was super steady and reliable. And yeah, and then that, I wonder if in some like spiritual way that prepared me for getting Lyme. Yeah.
Yeah. Might have planted a seed somewhere. Wow. Did you ever reach out to her when you were suspicious of having Lyme?
Did I? Man, the mental fog is really real. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, brain fog is real, right? And
Yeah.
even especially for old people like me, brain fog is a regular part of my everyday existence. So this has really been a beautiful conversation. The two of you have done such a brilliant job together. And Emma, I'm going to let you ask the last question. You are certainly able to use the Tick Bootcamp question or any other question you'd like to ask as we wind down this podcast.
All right. I hope I'm asking the right one. It's Lyme brain today, guys. It just is. It is what it is. Okay. What advice, and you could stop me if this is the wrong question or if I'm stealing your question. What
stealing
advice?
of it. We share it. At Tick Bootcamp, we share. We're an open source platform. We want everybody to share. So never feel that way with us.
Awesome. Well, then feel free to add. What advice would you give someone that you loved if they were just bit by a tick?
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird because I expressed hesitation with antibiotics, but you know, I have heard that if you catch it within the 72-hour window, you can stop it. And then after that 72-hour window, it becomes real risky. So with the knowledge base that I have right now, which could be very amateur, you know, I don't know. I would probably say get the antibiotic, right? Get the antibiotic, and I guess get the co-infection test and blood work. I don't know how long you have to wait after getting bit for the results to show up. I think it can really fluctuate. But if you get a false negative, if you get a negative test result, then get the blood work done again, you know, in 6 months or in another year. Like if you really feel like you have Lyme, just get the tests done. Even if the doctors are like, oh no, you don't have it, and you feel like you have it, just like, because I have a friend who got negative test results and was just told she was crazy for like years, like many, many, many years. And she was like, no, I know I have it. And then finally got a positive result. But that's because she was persistent in getting the blood work done.
So Nina, one of the things that I want to offer to you and to all of our listeners is the Tick Bite Blueprint we have on our website at Tick Bootcamp. What we've done, Nina, is over the course of now many years of doing these interviews, but even before we started these interviews, when I was on my journey not to get sick, we had interviewed many people, and we allowed this crowd to ultimately source a step-by-step guide for folks who get bitten by ticks. So I want to strongly urge our listeners, and I certainly want to strongly encourage you, Nina, that if anybody in your family who's ever bitten by a tick, there is a free step-by-step guide on the Tick Bootcamp website called the Tick Bite Blueprint.
Amazing.
Woohoo.
Ooh.
So important.
Watch out, Lyme.
Mhm.
That's right. We
Yeah.
have Nina, Emma, and Rich all together focusing on you, Lyme, and we're going to take you out. So,
Mhm.
Emma, I can't thank you enough for being a wonderful co-host,
No,
and
thank you.
Nina, I can't thank you enough for being such a beautiful spirit and being so kind and vulnerable, and sharing so much with our listeners, and allowing me at the end to just tie up some of the beautiful things that the two of you talked about and some of the beautiful information you shared. This is a really beautiful podcast, and I can't thank the two of you enough for joining us here at Tick Boot Camp.
Y'all are
Thank you.
amazing. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you seriously for the work you do. And Nina, your vulnerability and your story.